In celebration of the upcoming April 27th release of Avengers Infinity War, I started a series of reviews for movies set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Last week I did a review of Avengers Age of Ultron, so let's move on to the next entry in the MCU. Ant-Man.
Is it too late to change the name?
After serving a few years in prison, former robber,
I'm a cat burglar.
alrighty then, burglar, Scott Lang is released and tries to go on the straight and narrow so he can pay child support and keep seeing his young daughter Cassie. But after he gets depressed when he's fired by apparently the only people willing to hire an ex-con with a master's degree,
welcome to Baskin Robbins. Would you like to try our mango fruit blast?
Scott's path crosses with that of the mysterious Hank Pym, an elderly scientist who, back in the day, worked for S.H.I.E.L.D. as a scientist and as the superhero known as Ant-Man. But when Pym's former protege, Darren Cross, wants to replicate Pym's work for his own purposes, Pym decides to train Scott to become the new Ant-Man to stop Cross and save the world. Now, I'll admit, I was extremely nervous about this movie before some of the first trailers came out. I mean, you gotta remember, trying to keep up with news about this thing was pretty much a nightmare. Like, we saw Edgar Wright come in, and then he's out the door, the movie's almost ready to shoot, and then it's not. Like, there was so much back and forth, so much cool sounding stuff that I guess kept getting changed or just wasn't considered for the movie in the first place. I honestly don't know anybody who wasn't at least a tiny bit concerned about Ant-Man. Pun intended. And even when more concrete news started coming out, I was a little disappointed. Like, I was ready to see Hank Pym in action, watch how he developed the Pym particles, maybe even see how he influenced a couple scenes in the Avengers. So technically he was a founding member, just not in a way we would have seen on screen back in 2012. But thankfully all those concerns went out the window the minute I actually saw the trailers, even the weird ones.
Ants! Ant-Man!
Seriously, this right here was the definition of a fun Marvel movie. Tons of action, tons of humor, great actors, cool visuals. Honestly, after being a little disappointed by something like Age of Ultron, I'm really glad Kevin Feige and the rest of the Marvel higher-ups ended up kind of scaling things down again and going in what feels like a fresh direction for the MCU with Ant-Man. Like, instead of the usual, oh, there's a bad guy, let me fight a bunch of low-level thugs and get into a punching contest real quick. Instead, we get this like more action-oriented heist movie with a punching contest. Now, I wasn't entirely wowed by the fact that it took some major coincidences to kind of help move the plot along. Like, I know Scott has to put on the Ant-Man suit at some point, considering he's the main character, but it's weird that he would just put on something that, for all he knows, is just some leather suit a weird old man keeps in his basement. Or the Pym particles apparently let you keep your normal weight when you shrink, except for, all those times when it clearly doesn't. And I know this one's more the comic nerd in me complaining, but why couldn't Hank still be involved with Ultron's creation somehow? Like, it'd be so easy, just have him reference making an AI, or have some passion project with a file labeled Ultron or something. I mean, come on! Speaking of, I feel like something's missing around here. Oh well, whatever. Like I said, the movie's fun, so it's easy to forgive any mistakes. And adding to that fun is the fact that this thing feels like one of the most interconnected movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe so far. Like, I love all the tie-ins with a ton of the other characters and organizations we've seen up to this point, like the 10 Rings, Hydra, the Avengers.
I think our first move should be calling the Avengers.
Now, even though that doesn't exactly excuse not seeing the Avengers in pretty much any other Phase 2 movie, you've got to admit the delivery on that line was awesome. And speaking of the Avengers, there's this fight around the middle of the movie involving one of the members of the team that's fucking awesome. Fucking hell, I want to talk about it so much, but it's such a fun surprise cameo. I don't want to spoil anything for those of you who haven't seen this movie yet. Look, let me put it to you this way. It's a great scene overall, tons of action, tons of laughs, and honestly, it's probably one of the best scenes in the entire movie. It's that fucking awesome. And speaking of fighting, I thought the action in this movie was actually really good. I mean, yeah, this isn't exactly something like Doctor Strange, like all the fights are still just dudes punching each other, but the choreography is pretty good. And I really love how both Ant-Man and Yellow Jacket's shrinking abilities add to whatever fight scenes they have. Like, it gives the fighting this new dimension to it and helps spice up the whole thing. And speaking of spicing things up, can we talk about how fucking funny this movie is? Like, seriously, I know a ton of people don't really like how jokey Marvel's movies are, but come on, I think that type of tone really fits well with a concept like Ant-Man, at least the way it's set up here. Now, that's not to say that this movie's a full-on comedy or anything, but the humor's great, and it lands really well most of the time. And honestly, I think a big part of getting that humor to stick and mesh so well with the action and the more serious moments in the movie are thanks to the engaging performances the actors all throw in here. Of course, I have to mention that Paul Rudd is fantastic as Scott Lang. I did think it would be kind of hard to see him as anybody other than like some random dude after the types of movies I've seen him in.
I always thought that Matt Damon was like a Streisand, but
think that he's rocking the in this one.
Shut up, Dave!
But that's fine. I thought the fact that the movie puts more of a focus on Scott's relationships with people outside the suit played well with that image anyway. I wasn't a huge fan of either one of the Pims, since Michael Douglas seems to have this weird habit of having an emotion but hardly changing the look on his face, and Evangeline Lilly was always just like super prickly and uncomfortable to watch. I mean, I'm not saying I don't get why the character was like that, but I am saying that other actresses like Zoe Saldana or Scarlett Johansson were able to pull off the standoffish female badass thing without coming off like annoying or stubborn or whatever. Darren Cross was okay. He's yet another I'm a bad guy because reasons type of thing, but he's still fun to watch, and he does come off as pretty threatening when he gets down to fighting with Scott, although truthfully that's probably also due to the design of the Yellow Jacket suit, which looks amazing. But of course I can't talk about the actors in this movie without mentioning Michael Peña's Luis.
I was at a wine tasting with my cousin Ernesto, which was mainly reds, and you know I don't love reds, man. You know, but there was a rosé that saved the day. It was delightful.
I mean, this dude was fucking awesome. He was extremely funny and was just an absolute blast to see on the screen all the time. I especially loved any and all of those like story time moments, like when he just starts rambling about whatever.
And he tells me about this girl, Emily, that we used to kick it with. It was actually the first pair of boobs that I ever touched.
It's the wrong details. It's the wrong. It has nothing to do with the story.
Seriously, I've seen this thing floating around online about how he should narrate like the entire build up to Infinity War in character, and I gotta say, I love that idea. Seriously, Marvel, we all want to see this happen, so make it happen. You know what else was really cool? The special effects. Like the shrinking effect feels fresh compared to the type of shrinking we've seen in other movies in the past, and the Yellow Jacket suit looked and moved pretty damn well. I especially liked how this movie sort of pioneered that whole take an MCU actor and believably make them look young/old thing with Michael Douglas. Now I know this isn't the first time we've seen a movie in the MCU take an actor and change their age around, but I thought the effect was done so impressively here. Like seriously, look at him. When I first saw this movie in the theaters, a lot of people in the theater I was at actually like gasped or were all like, holy shit, when youngish Michael Douglas showed up on screen. It was really impressive, and it's crazy to think that Marvel actually got better at de-aging their actors over time. The only thing I didn't like was the relative lack of color and quote-unquote popping visual effects. I mean, I know crazy amounts of color in a Marvel movie wasn't really a thing till Phase 3, like with Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, but you'd think that out of all the movies we got in Phase 2, something like Ant-Man would have lent itself really well to that very dynamic, like comic book-like color scheme, you know what I mean? So there we go, that's Ant-Man. All in all, this is a great movie. It's not as big in scale like some of Marvel's other titles that came out around this time, but it's still really fun. The jokes and the humor in general land pretty well, the action's engaging, the actors are fantastic, and the movie opens the doors to a much crazier side of the MCU that future movies, like Doctor Strange, have a lot of fun messing with when they pop up in theaters. If you haven't already seen this one, I definitely recommend you check it out as soon as possible. But anyways guys, that's my take on Ant-Man. If you guys agreed with anything I said in this video, or if you have your own thoughts you want to throw out there, then go ahead and let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, I will see you all next time. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like this video, then go ahead and click that like button, and if you're new, maybe consider clicking that subscribe button too. I've also got links to my Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and Patreon in the description. You should probably check those out too. And if you want to see more of my content, then you can click the link to my last video. It's right there in the middle of your screen. Alright, and I will see you all next time.